But that just means we get to go on to 12 and the other class, which will be a quicker thing. Well, I say that. No, like I said, I think it'll be more like the same class that we did. So, as a review, our previous chapter 10, we went over the genealogy of Noah's 3 sons, and we read the 70 nations that sprung from them, including their territories. And chapter 10 was the response to God's command to Noah and sons to be fruitful and multiply, to spread out, right? And multiply. So now we come across an interesting segment in our Genesis 1 through 11. Up to chapter 10, things would have worked out perfectly to fold in half, so to speak. But then we kind of have like the second half is just a tale longer with an extra genealogy and everything as well. Okay, so Genesis 1 through 5 and then 6 through 11 instead of 6 through 10. Chapter 11, as its literary function, it acts as a segue, a coming out of these first 11 chapters and into the patriarchal narratives ahead. Okay, so chapters 12 and on. The Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph stories, which are some of my favorite stories. Okay. Yeah, 12 through to the end, of Genesis. So we've been looking at how these first 11 chapters of Genesis spoke to ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamia, mainly Babylon, and their cultures, their creation myths, their flood myths, all these things. And we have seen how they correct and, like we said before, jab elbows at their versions of these things. It's a level of truth that the Bible conducts that we are not used to. We're not used to having that ancient context of that. Well, we have some of that again with the tower story here. The tower has a meaning to the ancient audience of Mesopotamia especially, and Egypt in a different way, which we'll see. They also have towers. We call them pyramids. So, again, the Mesopotamians, especially Babylon and Egypt, are Israel's territorial neighbors. So we're going to hear of the land of Shinar. Shinar is in greater Mesopotamia, and the land of Shinar is where the ancient land of Babylon is going to end up. So typically, the Genesis genealogies will slip a character, as we notice in most all the genealogies, and then the last one is Noah, and then the story of Noah, It'll slip in a character that we're going to focus on in the next chapter's narrative. And so, in Genesis 10, slipped in a character. Anyone remember who it is that we're going to get into in chapter 11? Nimrod. Tells a little bit about him, even the saying. Everyone knows the saying. Genesis 10, 8 through 10 says, "Now Cush begat Nimrod. He was the first mighty man, first Gibor on earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore the saying is, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. His kingdom at the beginning was Babel, and Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar." So we're meant to take note of this guy. And it turns out that the Mesopotamians celebrated high towers. Whether we know it or not, it put them on the map as those guys with the technology and the advancements in their culture. They make bricks. They have the ability to, as they thought, rub elbows and meet with the gods up in these high towers. And so it seems that the ancients, especially in Babylon, believed in some way that their tower would be this gateway to the gods, a hub where the gods come down to meet with them. Exchange stories, tips and tricks, all this kind of stuff. These guys thought that they would make a name for themselves and most likely be known as this hub in the sky that would allow for the humans and gods to dialogue. So the etymology of the name Babylon is very significant here. Most of you are familiar with the Hebrew version, but what about the Babylonian Akkadian version? See, in Akkadian, Bab-il means gateway of the gods. And that's extremely important, knowing the contrast of what it means in Hebrew. Because we look at in Hebrew, Babel means confusion, mixed up. So the Akkadian Babil is gateway of the gods. And that's kind of important here because that's kind of what they're doing. They think they're the gateway of the gods. So if you kind of get my drift, if they build this tower, the gods will come down and dialogue with them. So it kind of reminds me of the Hebrew Hamas, violence, but then it's like this group name, like ironically in Hebrew it means something different than what it means in a different language. So based on the two meanings of Babel, we get these two interpretations that play into each other. Hey Talia, hi there. She's like, oh, I better get out. Meep, meep. Like the Roadrunner on Looney Tunes. You guys, I mentioned before the Babylonian creation myth called Enuma Elish, where the myth of Marduk, the sea beast, and he creates the sky and the land based on the gutted remains of this sea monster, basically. And that's their creation myth. Remember, the Bible kind of plays at that and jabs elbow to say, oh, the Tanin in Genesis 1 is just something God made, not a deity. Stars, not a deity. Sun, not a deity, just something God made. So in that sense, that's another way that the Bible promotes its truth to these ancient audiences. So in the Enuma Elish, we get that whole thing with the creation myth and all that. Babylon is a hub for the gods to meet at, and hence the name Babil, gate of the gods. And so it's the meeting place of where heaven and earth meets for them. And we have to know it's man-made, it's not God-sanctioned or anything like that. So imagine that the technology, maybe like thinking to be able to make bricks rather than have to go look for stones. Certain stones, their integrity might not be so reliable or not the same shape or whatever, but bricks, if they can mass produce them, that's a big technology here. And that's not a bad thing, but it's what they're doing with it. And so they use these bricks that they're going, as we'll read here in a minute. So the Babel interpretation implies that this is not the meeting place of the gods. Rather, as Jonathan Grossman in his commentary, he says the source of universal dispersion based on the Hebrew translation of the word. Commentator Nahum Sarna says the tower reference is certainly to the ziggurat, which is Akkadian meaning to build high towers. And this is historically noted. This isn't, the Bible isn't, other documents confirm this. It says the lofty, massive, solid brick, multi-stage feature of Mesopotamian cities that dominated their landscapes. And so here we're reading about one of them, which parallels directly with other historical documents as well. So the tower story, Genesis 11, 1 through 9. Let's go ahead and hear it. Feel free to follow along. I'll be reading out of Everett Fox's translation from the 5 books of Moses. Ready? Now, V'yehi. Now all the earth was of one language and one set of words. And it was when they migrated to the east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said, each one to his neighbor, come now, let us bake bricks, and let us burn them well burnt. For them, brickstone was like the building stone, and raw bitumen was for them like red mortar. And they said, "Come now, let us build ourselves a city and a tower, its top in the heavens and up to the sky, and let us make ourselves a name, a reputation, lest we be scattered over all the face of the earth." But the Lord came down to look over the city and the tower that the humans were building. And the Lord said, "Here they are, one people with one language for them all, and this is merely the first of their doings. Now there will be no barrier for them in all that they scheme to do. Come now, let us go down, and there let us baffle their language, so that no one will understand the language of his neighbor." So the Lord scattered them from there over the face of all the earth, and they had to stop building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, for there the Lord baffled the language of all the earth folk, and from there the Lord scattered them over the face of all the earth. Interesting. Everett Fox. Say it again. Confused, scattered, confusion. Yeah. Fox tries to go with the wordplay, so babble and what does he say? Baffle and babble. Yeah. So, well, let's go through some of these verses. So, in case you're wondering, and you should be wondering this, at least I wondered, I was like, what does this mean? Because when I never really paid that much attention to Genesis 10 so closely until I prepared this, that it keeps talking about their languages that they have and their lands that they have. And it's like, well, shoot. Here in 11 it says they have just one language, and they're just in one place. And, well, it's really cool. So this is really cool why this works out. So it's something like this. Noah and his family get off the ark. Genesis 10 takes you way ahead of time with the genealogy listed. So imagine it like this. I think I'm doing it like right from your guys' perspective. You start with the genealogy, Nimrod, you go all the way, keep going and going. Well, we're taking the Babylon story in Genesis 11, and it goes back here. Therefore, Genesis 10's genealogy just kept going. That's why. So it's not like, after that, there were many different languages and territories. They scattered. They didn't just stay in their one place. Okay. Maybe that's provoking in your mental awareness some key things in the book of Acts, maybe. The scattering and the one place, all the languages and all this thing. We'll get onto that later. But, so yeah. Go ahead, Art.
In Genesis 10, in verse 20, like you said, lays out some of the genealogy, gets to Nimrod, then continues with the genealogy.
Yeah, because Nimrod's right at the beginning, right?
Yeah. And then in verse 20, these are the sons of Ham according to their families, according to their languages. Then you go down here to 31. These are the sons of Shem according to their families, according to their languages.
Yeah.
No, there's only one language.
Yeah.
But that's after the Babel situation.
It's so important that you read it that way, that Babylon story is just plugged into where Nimrod is. And then, because I was like, oh, great. What am I going to do about this? I'm thinking, I can't wait to figure it out what it is. But then that's what it is. Very easy, and now makes sense. Because now after Babylon, guess what? There's lots of languages, and they are finally getting the point to scatter, right? Because after the flood, God said to go abroad the whole earth, and multiply, not just stay in the one place. So here, staying in one place is seen as not a good thing, So anyway, we'll get more into that. So lip, it actually says one lip. Kind of funny. Today in the Torah portion that I read, there was another instance of this, right, where it used on purpose a different word when it's talking about the staffs collected for Aaron. If you guys notice that, it doesn't say the word tribe, it said your ancestral houses or your father's houses. That you should collect the staff from each of your ancestral homes or your father's house, something like that. It didn't say tribe because tribe and staff are the same word in Hebrew, mateh. So I thought that was interesting that to not confuse you, it uses ancestral house or home or whatever it is in that passage instead. Because it's like the staff of the leader represented the tribe. It says something about their name being on it and everything. So mateh is that word. Also, by implication, there's something really cool with the almonds. You know how Aaron's staff, it says that like it budded, it flowered, it produced almonds. The word for almond in Hebrew is shached, which is also the word to hasten or to be quick. So it's kind of like a fun little play on the word there, how it may have just blossomed and did that in front of their eyes, the way it says it in the Hebrew. It says it did this, it did this, it did this. It makes it sound like when he pulled it out, it budded, it blossomed, like it did something and then he pulled it out and then it says it flowered, it budded, it bore almonds or something like that. And anyway, that's an implied meaning in the Hebrew that you can't get that in any translation. You can have a footnote or something, but the idea that it's hastening, it's quickly, like God says, it'll quickly come about who I choose, right? And it's Aaron, the almond, shaked. So here we have the languages, we have the tongues, the lashon. Now we have the lip. It literally uses the word for lip here. Shafatayim. It's dual, because we have two lips, shafatayim. Moses in Exodus 12 says that I am of uncircumcised lips. That's the same word here. That everyone was of one lip, even though it's in dual. One lips. They are in accord with what they say. And the one lip, like one set of words or one language, devarim can mean words or things. Davar can mean any of those things. In fact, the 10 Commandments in the Bible is not called Aseret Mitzvot, it's Aseret Devarim. It's the 10 words or the 10 statements, depending on the context. Devar is very contextual, of course. So it seems that this group in Babylon, is bound not just by the same language, but also probably their culture and their set of ideals. So this is important for setting the stage for this people group in Shinar. Separating or scattering them would be their ruin, because they've collectively gathered together and have this thing, and they had all things in common, right? With this language, we're all here and we're the hub and everyone's gonna know about us because we're so great, we have bricks and look at us. This is all just in 9 verses, mind you. So, they settle at a place called Shinar, and we heard about this previously from our previous chapter by a guy named He Will Rebel, Nimrod. He will rebel. Sounds like a great guy to follow, right? He built a city in Shinar. So they went east to Shinar, right? Guess who had to go east to go to the temple? Book of Acts, right? By implication, going to the temple, going east. So, verse 3, literally translated, most translations gloss this over, but it uses it double. Let us brick bricks, and let us burn them well burnt. That's what it literally says. So the verb is the action is the same as the noun. Yeah, let us brick bricks, most like make bricks, and burn them well burnt, is what it says. Yeah. So they put them in a kiln. Well, it's going to be for their hub, right? Their hub that they're making with all their advanced technology. Everett Fox points out, he says, an explanation of Mesopotamian building techniques for the Hebrew audience. That's what's explained here. And the text plays on sound. So the build and bricks, it's Levena, Leavin, and Hemer, Lahomer. So from them, brick, stone, basically. And so for them, brick, stone, Everett Fox tries to capture this play. For them, brick, stone was like building stone, and raw bitumen was for them like red mortar. Is how he translated that. So this is an advancement of technology. Again, it's not bad. It's not bad to have bricks. It's what they're doing it for, which God explains in a little bit. And Everett Fox puts it very bluntly, which I love. In verse 4, he says, "And they said, the Babylonians, 'Come now, let us build ourselves a city and a tower.'" It's like they really want to build a tower, but let's have a foundation first. Let's have a city, and then we'll build on that. Now remember, city builders, right? Shepherds and city builders. Let us make for ourselves a name, a reputation, lest we be scattered over all the face of the earth. So here it is. Let us build a tower. We'll be renowned among all the peoples. But if we don't, we'll be scattered. We'll have to move. I don't know. They think they have to move around and be scattered. But they think their works and their abilities will be made known in all the lands.
And do you think that, because I kind of lean this way, but I don't know for sure. Do you think that what they were building was, they were hoping it would become a capital of a global government, that it would become the source by which the world would be operated and would be educated and would be instructed? Do you think that it was kind of like making a name for themselves, kind of comes from the idea that they hope to be the central place for the globe?
Well, and
religiously, economically, politically, everything. It's going to come from here. It's going to come from this city.
I think you can definitely read that into the text. The one thing too is like knowing that historically Mesopotamia all had these big towers that it seems like this one was singled out to say, like, we're going to have the biggest of all of theirs. You know, the ziggurat, the build high towers that they're making. And yeah, their tower was going to be like a wonder of all the land, maybe the world, you know, like this.
We have individuals, humans, even Nimrod, working this, but there's a spiritual dynamic to this whole thing as well. Mm-hmm. So the devil's got an interest in this situation.
Yeah.
That's why it's kind of like, Nimrod's kind of like the first Antichrist figure in the sense of trying to put this global government together to overthrow God's kingdom.
Yeah.
Kind of like, we're going to see two main cities in all of Scripture, Jerusalem and Babylon.
Yeah.
Those are the two rival cities that come from the two rival spiritual, entities, Satan and God. And it's kind of like this whole thing here, it's more than this, even the bricks, because the bricks are fashioned to look the same.
They're made by man, right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, that's what it does to people. It kind of fashions their thinking process,
Pumps out robots,
blockheads. But the Lord said he's going to build the temple, or he's building his temple with living stone.
One stone at a time.
His believers are living stone.
Right.
We're different sizes, we're different shapes. We're not all pressed into the same thinking process.
Same mold.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of parallels, well, not parallels, a lot of, what's the word?
Sometimes that can happen
Contrast.
with seminaries too. Our how come you're a funny shaped brick? How come you look more like a rock? Right? Because like sometimes seminaries,
They do.
you assume, well, they got it all figured out. I'm just going to learn all this stuff and then I'll come out.
Make them all look the same.
Yep.
The stones that the builders rejected
Yeah.
was the one that wouldn't fit into the.
That's right.
What they thought wouldn't fit, but it ended up being the one that fit. Yeah.
And then what do you do when the stone is sitting out there and they're trying to build and stumbles again?
Trip over it. Yes.
It's out of place according to the system.
Have you guys heard of the debate on that, whether it's a cornerstone, usually it says? Cornerstone or a capstone. Some translations say capstone. And the capstone was that one that went up the top of an arch, and you had to cut it just right. Like a cornerstone is just more like you start building from there. You could say that's where the corners start. But like a capstone was more of like had to be done just right, or they'd be like, yeah, throw it out. And it supports those stones like that. I tend to take it more as the capstone just because of the implication of it, but they like, yeah, toss that out, that ain't what we wanted, you know. But yeah. Yeah. It brings more to the song "Leaning on the Everlasting Arms," you know, like leaning on Him. He's the capstone. So these Babylonians, they want to stay together for all the wrong reasons, and that's the problem here. The Lord wanted the sons of Noah to spread out, multiply, and the Babylonians wanted to stay together and multiply and magnify their reputation, not multiply like partnering with God and doing all these things. So in verse 5, it says, but the Lord, now, knowing what I told you guys about the towers, how they build them so that the gods would come down and they could converse with humans, this sounds frightening to me because God comes down, right? And it's like, oh, it's playing right into what they were wanting. And if, like, knowing that before, if you read it for the first time, you'd be like, oh, it worked. Get ready to have that rug pulled out. So, but the Lord came down to look over the city and the tower that the humans were building. So ironically, God comes down and it's like, oh, look at this tower structure work, you know. Look, the one true God came down. This is a big, magnificent thing. Not so fast. Verse 6, it says, the Lord said, here they are. This is what I like, however Fox translates this, because the Hebrew is continuous, and I'll point it out as we go. Here they are, one people with one language for them all. And this is merely the first of their doings, meaning this is just the start of what's going to happen. Now, there will be no barrier for them in all that they scheme to do. Once they can accomplish this, now we can take over the world, right? Their motivation is revealed. One people, one language. This is merely the first of their doings, and by implication, they are rather proud of this, and most likely, without God. They are not partnering with God in this case. They're building their own reputations. They're not magnifying the Lord's name. They're trying to set a reputation for themselves. Now there will be no barrier for them in all that they scheme to do. So once they succeed in this, there will be no stopping them. They'll keep going with this plan. It'll just snowball. Pride reminds me of Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall.
Just like Iran, we've got to stop the nuclear ambitions. We can't let it go. It's got to do this first. It's got to be focused.
Yeah.
Where else will they go? There's no stopping them at that point.
Right.
Once they've got it.
And ironically, here we are reading about this tower still. but not for their reasons that they wanted, right? We're reading about the problems. So verse 7, it says, "Come now, let us go down, and there let us baffle their language." Right? Babel, confused. "So that no one will understand the language of his neighbor." So this is going to greatly confuse their plans. Okay? Because God came down, he's confused their language. And again, this is the Bible correcting other cultures' problems, saying it's not just about that. Well, it's maybe doing the right thing for the wrong reasons, right? Like, I was listening to something that really changed my view on some things in the Sermon on the Mount. Tim Mackey of the Bible Project was talking about the hypocrite, and how hypocrite isn't like we think so much. We're like, how do people explain hypocrites usually?
You say something, you do the opposite.
Yeah, but he's saying no, it's you're doing the right things for the wrong reason. And that really changes how you look at that, because prayer, charity, fasting, they're doing the right things, but for the wrong reason. So why? For our name to be great. Look at what I'm giving. Look at me praying. Look at me fasting. Making your own name great, right? And that's not why these things are something that we practice. The ziggurat hub, where the city people's reputations are magnified and God's come down to chat, is now being corrected. It's like God came down to course correct things, to pull the rug out from under them. And in verse 8 it says, "So the Lord scattered them from there over the face of all the earth, and they had to stop building the city." Plan thwarted. At least here. It still kind of continues throughout today. Verse 9, it says, "Therefore its name was called Babel." Fox has Babel. "For there the Lord baffled the language of all the earth folk, and from there the Lord scattered them over all the face of the earth." So now they scattered. Now they're scattering. Now they're spreading out and multiplying. So, in a way, this is kind of comedy. This is a kind of comedy. The Akkadian Babel, meaning gate of the gods, which is most likely what it meant to them, but it just so happens that in Hebrew it means confusion, that it's kind of, in a way, poking fun at it. But to the Bible reader seeing this, it is like a joke, babble and baffle. So we see this wordplay here. And so those 9 verses is what we get for the tower story in Genesis 11. And as Art implied, there's a lot of, this is kind of the main city that's focused on outside of Jerusalem in the Bible. And there's something really cool that I want to point out on that here in a minute. I have some quick fun facts, some miscellaneous notes on the subject. The book of Acts have several hyperlinks or callbacks to Babylon, but they're mostly contrasting elements. We talked some about this at Shavuot. Acts 2, 1 through 11, one place, they're in one place, many languages. You can hear that melody, the contrasting of Babylon. The Jews and their nations mentioned is basically, from what Tim Mackey pointed out, is the table of nations that offshooted from Genesis 10. Shem, Ham, and Japheth's territories. It says, but now they're all Shemites. They're all the Jewish people. It says all these nations, so all of these nations represented by individual Shemites, Jews, they come together and what? They become a part of God's kingdom while they're in Jerusalem, the holy city. One place, languages, the city, right? kingdom as opposed to being scattered. You have the languages, the rebellious city and their own kingdom, all this thing, like the comparison and contrast of Babylon versus what is happening in Acts 2 with the Babylon, with the tower story. In Acts 8:4-5, it says, therefore, those who have been scattered went about preaching the word. Philip went down to the city of Samaria and began proclaiming Christ to them. So the believers are scattered due to their persecution of following God and partnering with him in his kingdom, rather than making a name for themselves, which some of the leadership was probably doing that. With the Sadducees, right? Caiaphas. So we have this is really cool, a rebellion repeated theme here. First, in Genesis 6, we have the sons of God. Now notice the motion here of up and down. We have the sons of God, they come down to the daughters of men. Now here we have God coming down, and it's the rebels that are not coming down, they're trying to go up. So see that? And so, in one scene the rebels are coming down, this one the rebels are trying to go up. And it plays that beat for beat in our Genesis 1-11 folding there. Repeated theme of city builders. First Cain and then Nimrod. The ultimate city builder, by implication, is who? By implication, because, doesn't really talk about it, but it's definitely implied. We definitely call one of their structures a wonder of the world, still today. Anyone? I'll give you a clue. They built their structures in their city on the backs of slaves, Hebrew slaves. Egypt! The bricks, right? The structures, the high structures, Babylon and Egypt, it's there. Once you learn about Egypt or the Babylonians, you can't help but see all of it in the Egyptians as well. They're building the bricks, but they're making God's people do it. And then they're trying to go up. I mean, you look at their pyramids, right? People, don't they call that one of the wonders of the world? The Great Pyramid? Right? We still know them as that. The Babylonians failed at it, though. We don't have one of their still standing that, we say, oh yeah, the Ziggurat building empire from Babylon, look at that. But Egypt does. But it doesn't mention it so much like that in Scripture. It's by implication only, and by what we see historically. What's that? The Hanging Gardens, yeah. Say it again. Oh, well, I guess just people were more fascinated with Egypt. It's still like taped off, and it's a tourism, people study Egyptology, but is it, Babylon is where Persia is, right? I'm not sure how many artifacts. I know there are the Ziggurat buildings in Mesopotamia that you can see, like big stairways that are very steep, and like other ones. No. Well, in here it says they had to stop building it. So the Babylonian one never finished. But it doesn't mean other ones weren't, but they were destroyed, But in Egypt, we don't even know how they made those bricks, right? Like, we don't even have anything like that today that can move bricks like that. You have to get like several helicopters or something, and yeah, there's a lot of theories on it. Yeah, it's crazy. It's something else. But yeah, the Egyptians definitely made a great name for themselves. We know them for that. They're ziggurats, their buildings,
Babylon is like the capital.
Oh, sure.
Here in Isaiah 14:12 it says, how you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations. For you said said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. That's exactly what they were trying to accomplish there at Babel.
Can you read that again?
This is Isaiah 14, 12, and 13.
Okay.
How you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation, on the far sides of the north. I will ascend into the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High.
Yeah. Same spirit of that
But you will
going
be
up. Yeah.
thrown down to Sheol, to the lowest parts of the pit. Yeah. It's him who's behind this project.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sure.
Nimrod is his god.
If you can just sidetrack the people of God to do this other thing that will feel purposeful and intention, meaningful, and everyone will know about it. Totally blinded, right? You're just, yeah.
And doesn't he say
It's very prideful. Oh yeah. All rooted in pride. Making ourselves a great name. Okay. We can do this in the ministry. We can make great names for ourselves. Oh, this guy. Oh my. Wow. Like who's glorified in your ministry? Is it you or is it the Lord?
How long are you going to go into this whole idea of Babylon? Are you going to go into the whole Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon?
Nope.
So
I may open that up for you to. John's going to talk about some things. I have a few more like little fact things to go over, and then if you want to mention that, we can go over that. Yeah. So Tim Mackey of the Bible Project points out an interesting Hebrew wordplay. I never noticed this. So God is the first builder. He points out the first time that build is used in the scripture is God. It says he builds a life giver for Adam. He built her from him. And Eve is then described as an ezer, a helper. And so the word for city is the word ear. It's a guttural, like Hermit the Frog. How do you doing, neighbors? Ear. So, you have ezer and ear, right? So what, right? Like, who cares, Andrew? What's the deal with that? So check out how they look in Hebrew. This is an example of a visual Hebrew wordplay. The only difference, now especially if you're writing it, is the tail with the yud versus the zayin extends all the way down. So ezer and ear look very similar in the Hebrew. Now, there is an uncanny connection here. You might say, well, so what? Ear, city, and helper look similar, but they're spelled different, but visually, it's just a tail longer. Does God have a city? Like Art mentioned earlier, Jerusalem. Are there any monikers given to Jerusalem?
It's a moniker.
Like a nickname?
City of David, Zion?
City of David, Zion, Lady Zion, Kate, the New Jerusalem coming down, prepared as a bride is adorned for her husband. There's this idea of this feminine version of God's city as like the helper and the city here. Because it's like with God's city, now again, coming down, you get that, the going up, the coming down, all this sort of thing. It's coming down as a bride, the helper, the ezer. And it's like, so you have this interesting visual wordplay in the Hebrew, and I thought that was really cool. Adorned for her husband, it says. So God's city is described as a female, like a helper for her husband, dressed up, and everything. So ezer and ear make an interesting wordplay in that sense. So human-built cities are an attempt to provide the city's own security, right? To create, in essence, their own Eden. So that's just some things to note here in Genesis 11. And I will never read the first 9 chapters the same again. There's just so many little things there that make the story make more sense knowing the context of Babylon and the ancient culture that it was also addressing to promote its truth. Even just in the etymology of Babil and Babel, the gateway of the gods versus the confusion, Babel. So, John? Oh, I want to mention one more thing. Maybe I'll let you mention this. Gary Schnitger! Old Gary. I'll have John talk about this. Yeah, just mention this and then talk about whatever.
So it looks like there's a chiasm in chapter 11 from verse 1 through 9. The whole world had one language. Should I go AA?
Yeah.
So the world had one language in verse 1. In verse 9, the language, confused language of the whole world. In verse 2, they settled there. In verse 8, they scattered from there. So we're moving in from the beginning and the end. Verse 3a, they said to each other. And then in 7b, their language, so they would not understand. And 3b, come let us make bricks. 7a, come let us go down and confuse. 4a, let us build for ourselves. And then in 5c, the people were building. 4b, a city with a tower. 5b, the city and the tower. And here's the center point. 11:5a, the Lord came down to see. So that's the turning point. That's the important. It's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's a very obvious one there.
Yeah, let me show them.
Yeah.
I like seeing the visualness of it. It makes the chiasm members the Greek chiasmus that makes the X shape. So it's like, you just see how it's the center point and then they match. All the way down. So yeah, A, B, B, C, C, and then it has the center point of G there.
That is cool.
Would you mind if I draw on any of these pages?
You can draw this.
Okay. So I think last week, before I realized that I was ahead of myself, I was going to ask, I was talking about Babel and how Babel, it was started by Nimrod, who's this hunter, and he goes and gathers these people to create a city, right? And like we were talking about the shepherds versus the city builders and that whole narrative of like God's people started as shepherds.
The nomads.
The nomads, like God gives them the city, but they're not, they're out to build a city, to make a name for themselves like these people. And then finally when they, start their effort, God comes down and confuses their language. So they're like, how would you define confusion other than just not knowing, What is confusion of language?
What's the opposite of unity? Like,
This
no.
separation, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're trying to build up with materials, right? And they're trying to reach the heavens, which is like the abode of God. Meaning, it's to play their, like you said, it's like they're trying to commune with God. Why would they do that? To get insight, revelation, wisdom, to become gods, basically, to become the authorities, to make a name.
Connect. Come over to our
Yes, right. Like we're the mediators, you know. So but then God comes down, ironically, you know, and he confuses their language. And if you think about what is language, you know, I'll just use the word. If I just say word, if you weren't an English speaker, it would just sound like bleh, you know, just a noise we make with our mouths. So, but you can also spell it. So we take these building blocks, just and we apply a higher meaning to it, right? We were trying to represent something that's metaphysical, which is meaning. And so we're bringing this idea down and combining it with these elements to create this union of a word, so to speak, or a language, you know. And so God breaks this connection, and they can no longer convey meaning to each other using language, using words. So and then that ultimately destroys their effort to do that. So just kind of
lost their connection.
They lost the connection. Yep, he come down. They're trying to bridge the heaven and earth with their tower, and he breaks that connection. And that's exactly what he did when he confused their language. He broke the connection between higher meaning and this lower vocalization.
And they're
Yeah. His authority comes from God. We just read about this today. All authority and power comes from God. So it's just kind of a microcosm of the material world that they were trying to accomplish. I think that's all, because I talked about the other stuff already. But so you mentioned in Egypt, right? They were making bricks. So in terms of Genesis as Torah, you know, it's just reminding us that this is a prototype of the empire of Egypt, so to speak, that we're to flee out of. And of course, later during the Babylonian captivity, eventually they were released to go back. Some people didn't want to go back. They were called to leave Babylon and go back to God's place. And today we are called to come out of Babylon. So it's just that speaking through narrative instead of, you know, just a command. It's showing you this is the end result of human effort, of empire to make a name, to make a reputation, according to human effort. You know. Versus God, like just communing with God as He intends and speaking with Him, learning about Him, becoming like Him.
That's what they were going to do, is take authority for what their motive was. And God knew that the motive was. And then it would be authority from what God should have done for David's so God's like, no, I'm sure
It's not like that ego boost. He's the creator. He's the top of everything. Humans have to realize that when they do it, and that's when we come to fact that we need to be saved from our predicament, you know. But if not, then you're like, oh, I don't think God here, we know God. Which is just a fact.
And some of you probably recognize this glaring thing that I didn't actually talk about, but what does this remind you of? That's exactly what this world empire Illuminati, even, you know, who knows what the Illuminati actually is, but like that thing on the dollar is a allusion to Egypt, to Babylon, to this effort, you know, and so that's what's behind the world powers, and that's their symbolism, but that's what they're talking about, you know, basically.
Wasn't it like Benjamin Franklin wanted the splitting of the Sea of Reeds on the back of the dollar bill?
Oh, really?
And then it's gonna be a pyramid, like.
Yeah. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I read that in a commentary. Because he said we have a pyramid we all see now. Like, if you want to talk here, Art, it's like, yeah, 1 minute.
How come I always get the limit?
Well,
Because I talk the longest.
so we go.
Yeah, I'll just talk. I wanted to share some thoughts real quick. Some of the stuff we shared this last Tuesday at our Bible study is, you know, this whole idea. Thank you, sir. Yeah, this whole passage here is extremely intriguing to me, because the whole idea behind this passage here in these first 9 verses of 11 is what the scripture talks about in Isaiah 14 as the enemy trying to rise up above God before pictures that before the world was ever created, there was already this battle going on and being waged. So when you look at the garden, you kind of see the idea of a kingdom being established with 2 people that were supposed to populate this kingdom. But an enemy came into the midst of it to tear it apart. And thus you start this whole process by which Andrew's been getting into, the seed of the serpent and the seed of God, and you know, the seed of the woman and so forth. This whole idea of coming down. Now you have this physical city being manifested here by a man named Nimrod, an antichrist figure, if you will. And it's kind of interesting because it says that they're building a city. Well, there's going to be 2 cities in all of Scripture, throughout the entire Scriptures. There's going to be 2 cities that are going to be elevated far above any other mention of cities. Jerusalem and Babylon. Jerusalem, the city of God. Babylon, dare I say, the city of Satan. And it's very interesting. What's that?
Both neighbors.
Yeah, both neighbors. That's right. That's exactly right. And this city, like the city of God, would have a temple. This city's temple was the tower. The tower was like a temple to Satan. So you had this city, and now a temple within this city. And it says here that the Lord came down and destroyed all of this, but Babylon is not destroyed. The spirit of Babylon continues on. The building is abandoned, but we hear just a few chapters into the Bible, we're going to read about Babylon, ruled by Nebuchadnezzar. It's a world power. And Babylon gets conquered by Medo-Persia. Daniel is told that there's going to be 4 major kingdoms in this world before the Messiah's kingdom is set up forever and ever. It's going to be Babylon. Babylon was the head. Medo-Persia was the chest and the arms. And then you had Greece. That was the midsection here. And then you had Rome, the 2 pillars of Rome with the 10 toes and so forth. And the whole thing is very interesting because when Medo-Persia conquered Babylon, that was not the end of Babylon. In fact, after Medo-Persia conquers Babylon, they still refer to it as Babylon. And the interesting thing is here is the mindset of Babylon rules all 4 of the world kingdoms. It's the headset. It's the one when Greece conquered Medo-Persia, it was not its own thing. It still is functioning by the head. Nebuchadnezzar was the head. Babylon was the head. And then the 2 pillars of Rome, like the original Roman Empire and then the revised end-time Roman Empire. Both of these legs held up this statue of all human government coming down through the ages. But we do not see Babylon basically completely eliminated. We do not see Babylon eliminated in its entirety until Revelation chapter 18. Fallen is Babylon the Great. That means there is a Babylon right now. There's a false religious system that is very, very powerful in our world today. And we see little aspects of it, even on our own money, what we were just talking about and so forth. But it will be overthrown. And what will Babylon fall to? What will it ultimately bow to? And its king thrown into the lake of fire? Because its king is Satan. What will it be? What will it bow to? What will it fall to? Fallen. To the New Jerusalem. The city that will win out. And the king that ultimately wins out. That's this big cosmic battle throughout the entirety of Scripture. And we do not see it concluded until we get to the very end, when the rightful king comes and rules the rightful city with the rightful temple to the living God. That's the glorious part of this whole thing. And then followed up by a restoration of that first original kingdom. And it's all very beautiful stuff. So anyway, that's all I had to share.
That's awesome.
Very nice. Yeah, Art, it's like the temple, where heaven and earth meet, and then the Tower of Babel, same thing, but for the wrong reasons. It glorifies himself versus it glorifies God. Yeah, there we go.
The tower was a temple.
All revelation.
The tower was a temple, basically.
Yeah,
It's a temple
it's
of
the
devil.
same thing, the
That's
heaven
right.
and earth connection.
That's right. Absolutely.
Instead of a mountain, it's a man-made brick.
Artificial mountain.
Crazy. That's again